In the quiet suburb of Millbrook, nestled just outside the bustling city of Hartford, Connecticut, a heinous crime shattered the illusion of peaceful suburban life. On a crisp autumn morning in September 2018, the body of 17-year-old Sarah Thompson was discovered in the woods behind her family's home. The gruesome scene sent shockwaves through the community, leaving residents locked behind their doors and whispering about the killer who walked among them. Detective Michael Carter, a seasoned investigator with the Hartford Police Department, was called to lead the case. With his sharp intuition and unwavering dedication, Carter delved into the intricate web of lies and deceit surrounding Sarah's murder. Little did he know that this case would challenge his perceptions and force him to confront the darkest aspects of human nature. As the investigation unfolded, suspicion initially fell on Sarah's stepmother, Amanda Wilson. The troubled relationship between the two had been no secret to their neighbors, and Amanda's apparent jealousy of her stepdaughter seemed to provide a motive. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly straightforward case lay a twisted tale of betrayal, secrets, and fatal consequences. At the center of this tragedy stood Robert Wilson, Sarah's stepfather, a respected businessman and pillar of the community. Robert appeared to be the grieving father figure, supporting his wife through their shared loss. But as Detective Carter would soon discover, Robert's carefully constructed facade concealed a web of lies that would ultimately lead to his downfall. This is the story of a murder that tore apart a family, challenged a detective's instincts, and revealed the devastating consequences of unchecked desire and betrayal. It serves as a chilling reminder that sometimes the most dangerous predators are hiding in plain sight, wearing the mask of normalcy in our very own neighborhoods. Sarah Thompson was a vibrant and promising young woman whose life was tragically cut short just weeks before her 18th birthday. Born to single mother Amanda Thompson in 2001, Sarah grew up as a bright and curious child, always eager to learn and explore the world around her. From an early age, Sarah showed a passion for art and literature. Her teachers often praised her creativity and insightful essays, marking her as a student with great potential. Sarah's artwork adorned the walls of her high school, and she had recently begun to explore photography, capturing the beauty of nature in the woods behind her home, the same woods that would ultimately become the site of her untimely death. Despite her academic and artistic achievements, Sarah's home life was far from perfect. When she was 12, her mother married Robert Wilson, a successful local businessman. While Sarah initially welcomed the stability Robert brought to their lives, the relationship between stepdaughter and stepfather grew increasingly strained as Sarah entered her teenage years. Friends and classmates described Sarah as kind-hearted but fiercely independent. She had a small, tight-knit group of friends and was known for standing up against bullying in school. Her best friend Emily Chun recalled Sarah's dream of studying journalism at NYU, aspiring to become an investigative reporter and uncover truths hidden beneath the surface. Sarah's relationship with her mother, Amanda, had always been complex. As an only child, Sarah had been the center of Amanda's world for years. However, the arrival of Robert in their lives created a shift in dynamics. Sarah often felt that her mother prioritized her new marriage over their mother-daughter bond, leading to frequent arguments and emotional distance. In the months leading up to her death, those close to Sarah noticed a change in her demeanor. She became more withdrawn, spending increased time alone in her room or wandering in the woods with her camera. Her art took on darker themes, and her usually meticulous schoolwork began to slip. Emily remembered Sarah seeming distracted and worried, but when pressed, Sarah would brush off concerns with a forced smile and a change of subject. What no one knew at the time was that Sarah had stumbled upon a secret that would prove fatal. In her quest for truth and her natural curiosity, she had uncovered something that someone was willing to kill to keep hidden. Sarah Thompson's young life, full of promise and potential, was snuffed out just as she stood on the threshold of adulthood, leaving behind a community in mourning and a mystery that would shake Millbrook to its core. Robert Wilson, aged 45 at the time of Sarah's murder, presented himself as the epitome of suburban success. A charismatic and well-respected financial advisor, Robert had built a thriving practice in Hartford, managing the wealth of some of the city's most affluent residents. His polished appearance and confident demeanor made him a natural leader in the community, serving on the local chamber of commerce and coaching youth soccer. Born and raised in a working-class family in Boston, Robert had clawed his way up the social ladder through a combination of charm, intelligence, and ruthless ambition. He met Amanda Thompson at a charity gala in 2012, and their whirlwind romance culminated in marriage just 8 months later. To the outside world, Robert appeared to be the perfect husband and stepfather, providing stability and financial security to Amanda and Sarah. However, beneath the veneer of success and respectability, Robert harbored dark secrets and unfulfilled desires. His marriage to Amanda had quickly lost its luster, and he found himself drawn to the excitement of an illicit affair. For the past year, Robert had been involved in a passionate relationship with Elena Gonzalez, the wife of his next-door neighbor and close friend, David. Robert's affair with Elena was more than just a physical attraction. He felt truly alive in her presence, experiencing a connection he believed he had never shared with Amanda. The two lovers would meet in secret, stealing moments of passion while their spouses were at work or running errands. Robert became expert at lying and manipulating those around him to maintain his double life. As Sarah entered her late teens, Robert found himself increasingly uncomfortable in her presence. Her perceptive nature and keen eye for detail made him paranoid that she might uncover his infidelity. He began to avoid spending time alone with his stepdaughter, making excuses to miss family dinners and events. Friends and colleagues described Robert as charming and generous, always ready with a joke or a helping hand. David Gonzalez, unaware of Robert's betrayal, often praised him as the best neighbor and friend a man could ask for. Robert's clients trusted him implicitly, drawn in by his confident assurances and impressive track record. Yet, those who knew Robert best sensed an underlying current of discontent. His assistant at the financial firm noted his increased irritability and distraction in the months leading up to Sarah's death. Robert's longtime friend from college, Mark Stevens, observed that Robert seemed to be living on edge, as if constantly looking over his shoulder. Little did anyone suspect that behind Robert Wilson's carefully crafted image lay a man capable of unspeakable acts, driven by desperation to protect his secrets and preserve his way of life at any cost. The grisly discovery was made on the morning of September 15, 2018, by a jogger on his usual trail through the woods behind the Wilson residence. The body of Sarah Thompson lay partially concealed beneath a pile of leaves and branches, a crude attempt at concealment that did little to hide the horrific nature of the crime. Detective Michael Carter arrived on the scene within the hour, his experienced eye taking in every detail. Sarah's body showed signs of a violent struggle. Bruises marred her arms and face, and defensive wounds on her hands indicated she had fought desperately for her life. The cause of death was immediately apparent: a jagged wound across her throat, likely inflicted with a serrated blade. As the forensics team combed the area for evidence, Carter noted several key details. Sarah's camera, which friends claimed she always carried on her woodland excursions, was missing. Drag marks and disturbed vegetation suggested the body had been moved from the initial site of the attack, possibly in an attempt to hide it from immediate discovery. Perhaps most tellingly, there were no signs of sexual assault, leading Carter to suspect that the motive for the murder was personal rather than opportunistic. The brutality of the attack pointed to a crime of passion. Someone who knew Sarah and had been driven to a moment of uncontrollable rage. As news of the murder spread, the once peaceful community of Millbrook descended into a state of fear and suspicion. Neighbors who had previously left their doors unlocked now double-checked their security systems. Parents kept their children indoors, and the woods that had once been a place of recreation became a no-go zone, cordoned off with yellow police tape. Detective Michael Carter, a 20-year veteran of the Hartford Police Department, took charge of the investigation with grim determination. Known for his meticulous approach and uncanny ability to see connections others missed, Carter had solved some of the department's most challenging cases. As he stood in the Wilsons' living room, surveying the family photos on the mantel, he knew this case would test him like never before. The first 48 hours of the investigation were a whirlwind of activity. Carter and his team conducted initial interviews with family members, friends, and neighbors. Sarah's school records were examined, her social media accounts scrutinized, and her movements in the days leading up to her death were painstakingly reconstructed. Robert Wilson, appearing shell-shocked, provided a detailed account of his whereabouts on the night of the murder. He claimed to have been working late at his office, a fact corroborated by security footage and his assistant's testimony. Amanda Wilson, still visibly distraught, struggled to maintain composure during her interview. She admitted to having argued with Sarah the afternoon before her disappearance, but insisted it was just typical mother-daughter friction. As Carter delved deeper, a picture began to emerge of a household fraught with tension. Neighbors spoke of frequent arguments between Sarah and her mother, their raised voices often carrying across manicured lawns. Sarah's best friend, Emily Chun, revealed that Sarah had been increasingly unhappy at home, feeling trapped and misunderstood. The forensics team's initial findings provided more questions than answers. Trace evidence found on Sarah's clothing didn't match samples taken from Robert or Amanda. The murder weapon, likely a hunting knife or similar serrated blade, was nowhere to be found despite an extensive search of the Wilson property and surrounding areas. A breakthrough came when Carter interviewed Elena Gonzalez, the Wilsons' next-door neighbor. Elena, visibly nervous during the interview, mentioned that she had seen Sarah arguing with Amanda in the driveway the day before her disappearance. More intriguingly, Elena let slip that Amanda had always seemed jealous of her daughter's youth and beauty. This information, combined with the tumultuous home environment and Amanda's shaky alibi for the night of the murder, led Carter to focus his attention on Sarah's mother. He theorized that years of resentment had finally boiled over, resulting in a confrontation that turned deadly. As the investigation entered its second week, Carter felt confident they were on the right track. He obtained a warrant to search Amanda's personal belongings and communications, hoping to find the crucial piece of evidence that would break the case wide open. However, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of Carter's mind. Something about Robert Wilson's calm demeanor and perfect alibi struck him as too neat, too convenient. Little did Carter know that his instincts were leading him toward a truth far more sinister than he could have imagined. As the investigation progressed, all signs seemed to point toward Amanda Wilson as the prime suspect in her daughter's murder. Detective Carter, driven by the evidence at hand, began to build a case against the 42-year-old homemaker with a troubled past. Carter's team uncovered a series of heated text exchanges between Amanda and Sarah in the weeks leading up to the murder. In one particularly vicious argument, Amanda accused Sarah of trying to sabotage her marriage, while Sarah fired back, calling her mother a pathetic, jealous old woman. These digital breadcrumbs seemed to support the theory of a family dynamic that had reached a breaking point. Further fueling suspicion was Amanda's behavior in the aftermath of Sarah's death. While initially distraught, she quickly became defensive and evasive during questioning. Her alibi for the night of the murder was weak. She claimed to have been home alone watching television with no one to corroborate her story. A search of the Wilson home uncovered a journal hidden in Amanda's bedside table. Entries detailed her growing resentment towards Sarah, lamenting the girl's beauty and the attention she received from Robert. One disturbing passage read, "Sometimes I wish she would just disappear. Our lives would be so much better without her constant presence, her judging eyes." The case against Amanda seemed to strengthen when a neighbor reported seeing her return home in the early hours of the morning on the day Sarah's body was discovered. Amanda had no explanation for this late-night excursion, claiming she must have been sleepwalking, a condition she had never mentioned before. As circumstantial evidence mounted, Carter felt increasing pressure from his superiors and the media to make an arrest. The community, gripped by fear, demanded justice for Sarah. Amanda Wilson, once a sympathetic figure, became the target of public hatred and suspicion. Carter, despite his growing certainty of Amanda's guilt, couldn't shake a lingering doubt. Something about her desperation and fear during interrogations didn't align with the calculated killer he believed had committed this crime. Nevertheless, with the evidence at hand, he prepared to make an arrest. On a rainy Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Sarah's body was found, Amanda Wilson was taken into custody. As she was led from her home in handcuffs, she protested her innocence, her cries echoing through the stunned neighborhood. Robert Wilson watched from the doorway, his face an unreadable mask as his wife was placed in the back of a police cruiser. Little did Carter know that in his pursuit of justice, he had fallen for a brilliantly orchestrated misdirection, leaving the true killer free to cover his tracks. The case against Amanda Wilson seemed airtight, but Detective Michael Carter couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It was a small detail, easily overlooked, that finally set him on the path to the truth. While reviewing security footage from businesses near the Wilson home, Carter noticed Robert's car leaving his office parking lot much earlier than he had claimed on the night of the murder. Intrigued by this discrepancy, Carter decided to dig deeper into Robert Wilson's life. He re-interviewed Robert's colleagues and clients, paying closer attention to the man's movements and relationships. It was during a conversation with Robert's assistant that Carter stumbled upon a crucial piece of information. Robert had been making frequent, unexplained trips to a coffee shop across town, always during his lunch break. Surveillance of the coffee shop revealed a startling discovery. Robert was meeting regularly with Elena Gonzalez, his neighbor's wife. The two displayed an intimacy that went far beyond friendly neighborly interactions. Carter had uncovered Robert's secret affair. With this new information, Carter approached Elena for another interview. Confronted with evidence of the affair, Elena broke down, revealing the extent of her relationship with Robert. They had been involved for over a year, stealing moments together whenever they could. Elena, racked with guilt, confessed that Robert had become increasingly paranoid that Sarah might uncover their affair. He had feared that her knowledge could ruin him both personally and professionally. As Carter pieced together the new evidence, the true motive for Sarah's murder began to crystallize. Robert, desperate to protect his secrets and preserve his way of life, had taken drastic measures. Convinced that Sarah had discovered his infidelity, he had lured her into the woods under the pretense of discussing a family matter and murdered her in a fit of rage. The missing camera was the final piece of the puzzle. It was found hidden in Robert's office, containing photos that Sarah had taken of Robert and Elena together. Realizing his mistake, Carter quickly moved to correct it. Amanda Wilson was released, and the focus of the investigation shifted to Robert. On a cold November morning, Robert Wilson was arrested at his office. As he was led away in handcuffs, the community of Millbrook breathed a collective sigh of relief. The true killer was finally brought to justice, and Sarah Thompson's memory was honored with the truth she had sought to uncover. Little did Carter know that his instincts were leading him toward a truth far more sinister than he could have imagined. As the investigation progressed, all signs seemed to point toward Amanda Wilson as the prime suspect in her daughter's murder. Detective Carter, driven by the evidence at hand, began to build a case against the 42-year-old homemaker with a troubled past. Carter's team uncovered a series of heated text exchanges between Amanda and Sarah in the weeks leading up to the murder. In one particularly vicious argument, Amanda accused Sarah of trying to sabotage her marriage, while Sarah fired back, calling her mother a pathetic, jealous old woman. These digital breadcrumbs seemed to support the theory of a family dynamic that had reached a breaking point. Further fueling suspicion was Amanda's behavior in the aftermath of Sarah's death. While initially distraught, she quickly became defensive and evasive during questioning. Her alibi for the night of the murder was weak. She claimed to have been home alone watching television with no one to corroborate her story. A search of the Wilson home uncovered a journal hidden in Amanda's bedside table. Entries detailed her growing resentment towards Sarah, lamenting the girl's beauty and the attention she received from Robert. One disturbing passage read, "Sometimes I wish she would just disappear. Our lives would be so much better without her constant presence, her judging eyes." The case against Amanda seemed to strengthen when a neighbor reported seeing her return home in the early hours of the morning on the day Sarah's body was discovered. Amanda had no explanation for this late-night excursion, claiming she must have been sleepwalking, a condition she had never mentioned before. As circumstantial evidence mounted, Carter felt increasing pressure from his superiors and the media to make an arrest. The community, gripped by fear, demanded justice for Sarah. Amanda Wilson, once a sympathetic figure, became the target of public hatred and suspicion. Carter, despite his growing certainty of Amanda's guilt, couldn't shake a lingering doubt. Something about her desperation and fear during interrogations didn't align with the calculated killer he believed had committed this crime. Nevertheless, with the evidence at hand, he prepared to make an arrest. On a rainy Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Sarah's body was found, Amanda Wilson was taken into custody. As she was led from her home in handcuffs, she protested her innocence. her cries echoing through the stunned neighborhood. Robert Wilson watched from the doorway, his face an unreadable mask as his wife was placed in the back of a police cruiser. Little did Carter know that in his pursuit of justice, he had fallen for a brilliantly orchestrated misdirection, leaving the true killer free to cover his tracks. The case against Amanda Wilson seemed airtight, but Detective Michael Carter couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. It was a small detail, easily overlooked, that finally set him on the path to the truth. While reviewing security footage from businesses near the Wilson home, Carter noticed Robert's car leaving his office parking lot much earlier than he had claimed on the night of the murder. Intrigued by this discrepancy, Carter decided to dig deeper into Robert Wilson's life. He re-interviewed Robert's colleagues and clients, paying closer attention to the man's movements and relationships. It was during a conversation with Robert's assistant that Carter stumbled upon a crucial piece of information. Robert had been making frequent, unexplained trips to a coffee shop across town, always during his lunch break. Surveillance of the coffee shop revealed a startling discovery. Robert was meeting regularly with Elena Gonzalez, his neighbor's wife. The two displayed an intimacy that went far beyond friendly neighborly interactions. Carter had uncovered Robert's secret affair. With this new information, Carter approached Elena for another interview. Confronted with evidence of the affair, Elena broke down, revealing the extent of her relationship with Robert. They had been involved for over a year, stealing moments together whenever they could. Elena, racked with guilt, admitted that she had lied in her previous statement to protect Robert. The affair cast Robert's alibi for the night of the murder in a new light. Elena confirmed that they had indeed met that evening, contradicting Robert's claim of working late. This revelation shattered the carefully constructed timeline Robert had provided. As Carter delved further into the relationship between Robert and Elena, he uncovered a web of lies and secret rendezvous. Bank records showed Robert had recently inquired about transferring large sums of money offshore. Email exchanges hinted at plans for a new life together, away from their spouses and responsibilities. The detective now faced a troubling question. Could Robert Wilson, the grieving stepfather, actually be Sarah's killer? The motive was unclear, but the cracks in Robert's perfect facade were beginning to show. Carter realized he had been so focused on Amanda that he had nearly missed the real story unfolding right before his eyes. The pivotal moment in the investigation came from an unexpected source: Sarah's best friend, Emily Chon. She approached Detective Carter with a small leather-bound book, Sarah's personal diary. Emily, racked with guilt, admitted she had initially withheld the diary, fearing it might tarnish Sarah's memory. But as suspicion fell on Amanda, Emily realized the truth was more important than protecting her friend's secrets. Carter spent a sleepless night poring over Sarah's private thoughts. The diary painted a vivid picture of a young woman grappling with a terrible discovery. In entries dating back several months, Sarah wrote of her growing suspicion that her stepfather was having an affair. She described catching glimpses of furtive text messages, overhearing hushed phone calls, and noticing Robert's increasingly erratic behavior. The most damning entry came just 3 days before Sarah's murder. In shaky handwriting, she recounted following Robert one evening and witnessing him in an intimate embrace with Elena Gonzalez. Sarah wrote of her disgust and betrayal, expressing uncertainty about whether to confront Robert or tell her mother. This revelation provided the missing piece of the puzzle. Sarah had discovered Robert's affair, presenting a clear motive for murder. Robert, a man who had built his life on carefully maintaining appearances, faced the threat of losing everything: his marriage, his reputation, and his financial stability. Armed with this new information, Carter revisited the forensic evidence. He ordered a more thorough examination of Sarah's clothing, specifically searching for trace evidence that might have been overlooked. The results were telling. Fibers found on Sarah's jacket matched those from a rare wool blend used in Robert's expensive suits. Furthermore, a re-examination of Sarah's phone records showed a series of calls to Robert's office number on the day of her disappearance. The calls had been brief, suggesting Sarah might have been trying to confront her stepfather or arrange a meeting. Carter also discovered that Robert had purchased a hunting knife from a local sporting goods store just a week before the murder. The knife, conspicuously missing from the Wilson home, matched the type of weapon believed to have been used in the crime. As the pieces fell into place, Carter realized the extent of Robert's deception. He had not only manipulated his family and community, but had also skillfully misdirected the entire investigation towards Amanda. The detective felt a mix of admiration for Robert's cunning and disgust at his cold-blooded actions. With mounting evidence pointing to Robert Wilson as the killer, Carter knew he needed to move quickly. The man who had once been viewed as a pillar of the community was now revealed to be a calculating murderer, willing to sacrifice his stepdaughter to protect his secrets. Detective Carter decided to confront Robert Wilson at his office, away from the prying eyes of neighbors and the media that had been camped outside the Wilson home. As Carter and his partner entered the plush confines of Robert's financial advisory firm, they found him in the middle of a client meeting, the picture of professional composure. In a voice barely above a whisper, Robert began to talk. He spoke of Sarah confronting him in the woods, threatening to expose his affair to Amanda and Elena's husband. He described the panic that overtook him, the fear of losing everything he had worked for. With tears streaming down his face, Robert recounted how he had lashed out in desperation, silencing Sarah permanently. The confession poured out of him, a torrent of guilt and self-loathing. Robert described how he had meticulously planned to frame Amanda, playing on the known tensions between stepmother and stepdaughter. As Carter placed him under arrest, Robert's only words were a broken plea. "Don't tell Elena. Please, don't let her know what I've done." The once proud man was led out of his office in handcuffs, his world collapsing around him as the truth of his actions finally came to light. After a 2-week trial and mere hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all counts, including first-degree murder. The judge, citing the brutal nature of the crime and Robert's calculated attempts to deceive investigators, sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice had been served, but for those whose lives had been shattered by Robert's actions, the wounds would take far longer to heal. In the end, the case of Robert Wilson stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable loss, the relentless pursuit of justice, and the enduring power of a young woman's voice, even when silenced, to ultimately reveal the truth. In April of 2015, this is the story of Johnny Rater, a successful real estate agent whose life was brutally cut short by someone he trusted most. Johnny Ray Baxter was a 45-year-old man living in Fayetteville, Arkansas. He was a well-known real estate agent who worked for a local company called Ozark Realty. Johnny Ray had a big smile and a friendly personality, which made him popular with his clients and colleagues. He had a degree in business administration from the University of Arkansas and had been working in real estate for over 20 years. Johnny Ray was married to Darling Baxter. Johnny Ray and Darling seemed like a happy couple. Johnny Ray was Darling's second husband. He had a stepdaughter named Lily Adams, who was 18 and in her first year at the University of Arkansas studying psychology. Johnny Ray got along well with Lily, or so it seemed to the outside world. Outside of work, Johnny Ray loved sailing. He owned a small sailboat named Dreamcatcher, which he often took out on Beaver Lake. He enjoyed spending weekends on the water, feeling the wind and the waves. His friends at the local marina remembered him as someone who was always willing to lend a hand and share a laugh. In the days before his death, Johnny Ray was busy with a big property deal. He was working hard to close a sale on a large commercial property in downtown Fayetteville. This deal was very important to him and his career. He was also planning a surprise anniversary trip for Darling. He had booked a cabin in the Ozark Mountains and bought tickets to see a concert in Little Rock. He even picked out a special necklace from a local jewelry store, Sissy's Log Cabin, as a gift for Darling. Despite his busy schedule, Johnny Ray made time to visit the local coffee shop Arsagas every morning. He enjoyed reading the newspaper and chatting with the baristas. His favorite drink was a caramel latte. On April 10, 2015, 2 days before his death, Johnny Ray was seen at Arsagas, smiling and talking about his plans for the weekend. He seemed happy and excited about the future. Johnny Ray's life seemed perfect on the outside, but there were hidden troubles. His wife, Darling, had been acting stressed and worried lately. She had noticed changes in their daughter Lily and was suspicious of Johnny Ray's late-night work meetings. Friends and neighbors had started to notice the tension in the Baxter household. On April 12, 2015, at about 7:30 a.m., Johnny Ray Baxter's body was discovered. The person who found him was his neighbor, Michael Everly. Michael was a 52-year-old retired school teacher who lived next door to the Baxters. Darling had called Michael, worried because she hadn't heard from Johnny Ray since the previous night. She was out of town visiting her sister and asked Michael to check on her husband. Michael knocked on the door of the Baxter house but got no answer. He noticed that Johnny Ray's car was in the driveway, so he decided to try the door. To his surprise, it was unlocked. As he stepped inside, he immediately felt something was wrong. The house was unusually quiet. Michael called out for Johnny Ray but got no response. He walked through the living room and into the kitchen, where he saw signs of a struggle. Chairs overturned and broken glass on the floor. He followed the trail of chaos to the master bedroom. When he opened the door, he was met with a gruesome sight. Johnny Ray was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. He had been bludgeoned to death with a hammer, which lay nearby covered in blood. The room was a mess, with blood splattered on the walls and furniture. It was clear that Johnny Ray had fought for his life. Michael was horrified and immediately backed out of the room, his hands shaking. He pulled out his cell phone and dialed 911, his voice trembling as he described what he had found. The 911 operator tried to keep him calm, asking him to stay on the line until the police arrived. The news of Johnny Ray's death quickly spread through the neighborhood. Maple Street was soon filled with police cars, and curious neighbors stood outside, whispering to each other about the shocking event. Local news stations like KNWA and KFSM sent reporters to cover the story, and by noon, it was the top news in Fayetteville. Michael, who had been friends with Johnny Ray for years, was in a state of shock. He had never expected to find his neighbor and friend dead in such a brutal manner. He later told reporters that Johnny Ray was a good man who didn't deserve such a terrible fate. The discovery of Johnny Ray Baxter's body marked the beginning of a complex and tragic investigation, one that would uncover hidden secrets and lead to shocking revelations about those closest to him. The police arrived at the Baxter home quickly after Michael Everly's 911 call on April 12, 2015. The first officers on the scene immediately secured the area, making sure no one entered or left the house. Soon after, Detective Sarah Mitchell-Kinsey and Detective James Carter arrived to lead the investigation. Detective Sarah Mitchell-Kinsey was known for her sharp attention to detail. At 38 years old, she had solved many difficult cases. Her partner, Detective James Carter, was 42 and had a reputation for his methodical approach. Together, they made a strong team. As the detectives walked through the house, they saw signs of a struggle. The living room had overturned chairs and broken glass. The kitchen had more chaos, with dishes scattered on the floor. When they reached the master bedroom, they were met with a grisly scene. Johnny Ray Baxter lay on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. He had been bludgeoned to death with a hammer, which lay nearby, covered in blood. The walls and furniture were splattered with blood, showing the violence of the attack. Detective Mitchell-Kinsey noted the hammer as the murder weapon and ordered it to be bagged as evidence. The crime scene was chaotic and disturbing. The detectives and forensic team took many photos and collected samples. They used gloves to carefully pick up items, making sure not to contaminate any evidence. Blood samples, fingerprints, and the hammer were all collected and sent to the lab for analysis. Outside, neighbors watched as the police worked. The local news stations, KFSM and KNWA, were there too, reporting on the shocking murder. Reporters spoke to neighbors who described Johnny Ray as a friendly and well-liked man. The media coverage added pressure to solve the case quickly. Detectives Mitchell-Kinsey and Carter interviewed Michael Everly, who was still shaken from discovering the body. He described finding the door unlocked and seeing the mess inside the house. His detailed account helped the detectives piece together the events leading up to the murder. By the end of the day, the police had gathered a lot of evidence but still had many questions. Who could have committed such a brutal act? Why would someone want to kill Johnny Ray? The detectives knew they had a difficult case ahead of them, but they were determined to find the answers. The first suspect in Johnny Ray Baxter's murder was his wife, Darling Baxter. Darling was 34 years old and worked as an accountant for a local firm called Razorback Accounting. She was intelligent, meticulous, and hardworking. Darling had a tough past. She became a mother at 16 and worked as a stripper to support herself and her daughter, Lily. Despite these challenges, she built a successful career and was known for her strong-willed nature. Darling had recently noticed changes in her daughter Lily's behavior and grew suspicious of Johnny Ray's late-night work meetings. Friends and neighbors described Darling as increasingly stressed and on edge in the weeks before the murder. Some said they heard arguments between her and Johnny Ray. Detectives Sarah Mitchell-Kinsey and James Carter brought Darling in for questioning on April 13, 2015. Darling appeared calm but was clearly distressed. She maintained that she had been out of town visiting her sister, Nancy, in Little Rock. She provided photos and text messages to support her alibi, but the detectives still had doubts. During the interrogation, Darling spoke about her relationship with Johnny Ray. She admitted they had been arguing more lately, mainly about his work and the amount of time he spent away from home. She denied any involvement in his death, insisting she loved her husband despite their problems. The detectives asked Darling about the night of the murder. She explained that she had left for Little Rock on the afternoon of April 11th and stayed with Nancy until the morning of April 12th. Nancy confirmed this story when the detectives called her. However, they couldn't ignore the tension in Darling's voice when she spoke about Johnny Ray and the changes she noticed in Lily. The police also searched Darling's car and belongings for any evidence. They found nothing directly linking her to the murder, but they did find a diary in which Darling had written about her frustrations and suspicions. These entries painted a picture of a woman under immense stress and emotional turmoil. Despite her alibi, Darling remained a prime suspect. The detectives continued to look into her past, interviewing friends, family, and co-workers. They hoped to find a motive or any clue that could tie her to the crime. The pressure on Darling grew as the investigation progressed, but she remained steadfast in her innocence. The investigation into Darling Baxter was thorough, yet many questions remained unanswered. The detectives knew they had to keep digging to uncover the truth behind Johnny Ray's brutal murder. The second suspect in Johnny Ray Baxter's murder was his stepdaughter, Lily Adams. Lily was 18 years old and a freshman at the University of Arkansas, where she was studying psychology. She was known for her outgoing and sociable personality. Her friends described her as bright and ambitious, always eager to learn new things. Lily had a complicated relationship with her stepfather, Johnny Ray. It was revealed during the investigation that their relationship had evolved into a secret affair. This affair made Lily feel guilty and conflicted, especially as she saw the strain it put on her mother, Darling. Detectives Sarah Mitchell-Kinsey and James Carter brought Lily in for questioning on April 14, 2015. Lily appeared nervous but cooperative. She admitted to the affair with Johnny Ray, explaining that it had started about 6 months earlier. She said she had been feeling lonely and confused, and Johnny Ray had been there for her. She insisted she never wanted to hurt anyone. During the interrogation, Lily explained how she had confided in a close friend about the affair and her feelings of guilt. This friend, whose name was not disclosed, confirmed Lily's story to the detectives. Lily described the last time she saw Johnny Ray, which was the night before his death. She said they had argued about the affair and the impact it was having on their family. The detectives asked Lily about her whereabouts on the night of the murder. Lily said she had been at a friend's house studying for a midterm exam. Her friend confirmed this alibi, saying that Lily had stayed there until the early morning hours of April 12th. Despite the alibi, the detectives were suspicious of the emotional turmoil that Lily was going through. The police also searched Lily's dorm room and her belongings for any evidence. They found nothing directly linking her to the murder, but did find several letters and notes between her and Johnny Ray. These notes showed the depth of their relationship and the emotional struggles they both faced. Despite her alibi and the lack of direct evidence, Lily remained a prime suspect due to the affair and the emotional tension it created. The detectives continued to interview her friends and classmates, hoping to find any inconsistencies or new leads. The pressure on Lily grew as the investigation continued, but she maintained her innocence and expressed deep regret for the affair. The investigation into Lily Adams was thorough, but the detectives still had many questions. They knew they had to keep digging to find the truth behind Johnny Ray Baxter's brutal murder. On April 17, 2015, 5 days after Johnny Ray Baxter's murder, the police received a significant break in the case. It was a cool, cloudy morning when a jogger discovered a suspicious item in the park near Beaver Lake. He noticed a plastic bag partially buried under some leaves near a bench. Curious, he opened it and found a blood-stained shirt and a pair of gloves. He immediately called the police, and within minutes, patrol officers Karen Lewis and Tom Martinez arrived at the scene. They secured the area and called in detectives Sarah Mitchell-Kinsey and James Carter. The detectives quickly assessed the situation and bagged the items for forensic analysis. The detectives were cautious but hopeful that this new evidence would provide a breakthrough in the case. They brought the items back to the Fayetteville Police Department's forensic lab. Forensic analysts found that the blood on the shirt matched Johnny Ray's DNA. Additionally, the gloves had fingerprints that were not Johnny Ray's. This new evidence shifted the focus of the investigation. The detectives revisited their list of suspects and re-examined their alibis. They also reviewed the surveillance footage from the park and nearby areas. This extensive review led them to a surprising discovery. A figure matching Lily Adams' description was seen entering the park late on the night of the murder. Detectives Mitchell-Kinsey and Carter brought Lily in for a second round of questioning. This time, Lily was visibly more nervous. She claimed she had gone to the park to clear her head and had no idea about the bloody items. The detectives pressed her for more details, but Lily stuck to her story, albeit shakily. The forensic team continued their analysis and found another critical piece of evidence: hair fibers on the gloves that matched Darling Baxter's DNA. This discovery complicated the case further and indicated the possible involvement of both mother and daughter. On April 18, 2015, the detectives called Darling back for questioning. She seemed calm but concerned. When presented with the new evidence, Darling admitted to knowing about the gloves but insisted she had nothing to do with the murder. She said she had worn the gloves while gardening and couldn't explain how they ended up near Beaver Lake. The police were now more determined than ever to solve the case. They knew they were close to uncovering the truth but needed to carefully piece together the final puzzle. The discovery of the new evidence was a pivotal moment in the investigation, providing crucial leads and intensifying the search for Johnny Ray's murderer. Hey, true crime case solvers, interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. If you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate, leave us a comment. Stay safe, true crime case solvers. The third suspect in the murder of Johnny Ray Baxter was his ex-wife, Diddy Baxter. Diddy, aged 46, was known for her hot-tempered and aggressive nature. She had a contentious relationship with Johnny Ray and had never approved of his marriage to Darling. Diddy lived in Fayetteville and worked as a manager at a local grocery store, Harp's Food Stores. Detectives Sarah Mitchell-Kinsey and James Carter decided to bring Diddy in for questioning on April 19, 2015. Diddy arrived at the police station appearing defiant and uncooperative. She had a reputation for speaking her mind and not holding back her opinions. During the interrogation, Diddy admitted that she and Johnny Ray had a rocky relationship. She described their marriage as tumultuous and full of arguments. Diddy expressed her disdain for Darling, calling her a homewrecker and blaming her for the end of her marriage. However, Diddy vehemently denied any involvement in Johnny Ray's murder. The detectives pressed Diddy about her whereabouts on the night of April 11, 2015. Diddy claimed she was at home watching TV and drinking wine. She mentioned watching an episode of Dancing with the Stars and going to bed early. There were no witnesses to confirm her alibi, which made the detectives suspicious. The police searched Diddy's home for any evidence that could link her to the crime. They found a few items of interest, including a set of gardening gloves similar to the ones found at the park. However, forensic analysis showed no blood or DNA on these gloves. Despite her alibi and the lack of direct evidence, the detectives continued to probe Diddy's potential motive. They discovered that Diddy had recently learned about Johnny Ray's affair with Lily, which added another layer of tension and potential anger. Friends and co-workers told the detectives that Diddy had been particularly upset and vocal about the affair, calling Johnny Ray a disgrace and expressing her anger to anyone who would listen. The detectives also interviewed Diddy's neighbors, who reported hearing loud arguments coming from her house in the days leading up to the murder. One neighbor, Mrs. Everly, said she heard Diddy yelling about betrayal and lies. Although Diddy remained a suspect, the detectives found it challenging to gather enough evidence to charge her. She was aggressive during the interrogation but maintained her innocence. The detectives knew they needed more concrete evidence to link her to the crime. The investigation into Diddy Baxter added another layer of complexity to the case as the detectives worked tirelessly to piece together the events leading to Johnny Ray's murder. On April 21, 2015, a breakthrough in Johnny Ray Baxter's murder case finally came. After days of investigating, detectives Sarah Mitchell Kinsey and James Carter found a crucial piece of evidence. A surveillance camera from a nearby gas station had captured footage of Darling Baxter driving toward Beaver Lake late on the night of the murder. This was a significant lead that contradicted Darling's alibi. Detectives Mitchell Kinsey and Carter reviewed the footage carefully. It showed Darling's car, a blue Honda Civic, passing the gas station at around 11:30 p.m. on April 11th. This placed her near the crime scene at the crucial time. With this new evidence, the detectives were confident they had found Johnny Ray's killer. On the morning of April 22, 2015, the police arrived at Darling Baxter's workplace, Razorback Accounting. It was a sunny day, and the local news stations, including KFSM and KNWA, were already covering the latest developments in the case. Darling was in her office when the police entered. She looked surprised but remained composed as they informed her of her arrest for the murder of her husband. As Darling was led out in handcuffs, she maintained her innocence, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. The affair between Johnny Ray and Lily had driven Darling into a fit of rage. She felt deeply betrayed by both her husband and her daughter. The detectives believe that on the night of the murder, Darling confronted Johnny Ray. The confrontation escalated into violence, and Darling grabbed a hammer, fatally striking him multiple times. Darling's arrest shocked the community. Neighbors and friends couldn't believe that the hardworking, intelligent woman they knew was capable of such a violent act. The news spread quickly, with headlines in the Fayetteville Observer and segments on local news stations detailing the arrest. Johnny Ray's family had mixed reactions. Some were relieved that the murderer had been caught, while others were devastated by the betrayal. Lily was particularly heartbroken. She had lost both her stepfather and her mother in a matter of days. The emotional toll on the family was immense. As Darling was taken to the police station, the detectives knew they had finally solved the case. The investigation had been long and challenging, but their persistence had paid off. Johnny Ray Baxter's murder had been a tragic event that uncovered hidden secrets and tested the resolve of everyone involved. In the end, justice was served, and the community could begin to heal from the shocking crime. Stationed, she continued to deny her involvement. However, the detectives were confident in their findings. The surveillance footage combined with the forensic evidence and Darling's conflicting statements painted a clear picture of her guilt. The community of Fayetteville was left to grapple with the tragic events. Johnny Ray Baxter's murder had uncovered deep family secrets and left a lasting impact on those who knew him. The police had solved the case, but the emotional scars would take much longer to heal. The trial of Darling Baxter for the murder of her husband, Johnny Ray Baxter, began on July 15, 2015, at the Washington County Courthouse in Fayetteville. The courtroom was packed with reporters from local news stations like KFSM and KNWA, as well as concerned members of the community. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Robert Stevens, a 45-year-old with a reputation for being tough and relentless in the courtroom. He argued that Darling's motive for the murder was her discovery of the affair between Johnny Ray and Lily. Stevens painted a picture of a woman pushed to a breaking point by betrayal and emotional turmoil. He presented the surveillance footage of Darling's car near Beaver Lake, the forensic evidence from the crime scene, and the conflicting statements she had given to the police. On the other side, the defense was led by attorney Michelle Williams, a 39-year-old known for her calm demeanor and sharp legal mind. She argued that Darling was innocent and that the evidence was circumstantial. Williams suggested that someone else could have committed the murder, perhaps out of jealousy or anger. She questioned the reliability of the surveillance footage and pointed out that no witnesses had seen Darling commit the crime. Throughout the trial, Johnny Ray's family sat in the front row, watching the proceedings with a mixture of anger and sadness. Lily, in particular, struggled with the emotional weight of the trial. She had lost her stepfather and now faced the possibility of losing her mother to a long prison sentence. After 2 weeks of testimony, The jury deliberated for 3 days before reaching a verdict. On August 3, 2015, the jury found Darling Baxter guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom was tense as the verdict was read. Darling showed little emotion, while Johnny Ray's family wept and hugged each other. The local news immediately reported the verdict, and the story was covered extensively in the Fayetteville Observer. Judge Lisa Everly sentenced Darling to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She stated that the evidence clearly showed Darling's guilt and that the crime was a result of intense personal betrayal and anger. The judge expressed sympathy for Johnny Ray's family and hoped the sentence would bring them some measure of closure. The reaction to the verdict was mixed. Some in the community felt justice had been served, while others believed the sentence was too harsh considering Darling's difficult past and the emotional stress she was under. Johnny Ray's family, however, felt a sense of relief that the ordeal was over and that the person responsible for his death was held accountable. The trial and sentencing marked the end of a tragic chapter for the Baxter family and the community of Fayetteville. The murder and its aftermath had left deep emotional scars, but the verdict provided a sense of justice and a step toward healing. After Darling Baxter's trial and sentencing, life slowly began to return to normal for those involved in Johnny Ray's tragic murder case. For Darling, now serving her sentence at the Arkansas Department of Correction, life took on a stark routine. She was allowed limited visits from family and friends, with strict rules governing her daily activities. The media coverage surrounding the trial gradually faded, replaced by news stories and events in Fayetteville, like the annual Bikes, Blues, and Barbecue Motorcycle Rally. Lily Adams, now 19, returned to the University of Arkansas to continue her studies in psychology. She struggled with guilt and grief over her role in the affair that ultimately led to her stepfather's death. Lily sought counseling to help her cope with the emotional aftermath and worked hard to rebuild relationships with her family. She distanced herself from media attention, focusing on her studies and volunteer work at local animal shelters. Meanwhile, Detective Sarah Mitchell Kinsey received recognition for her role in solving the high-profile case. She continued her work at the Fayetteville Police Department, investigating other crimes and mentoring younger detectives. Detective James Carter transferred to the Northwest Arkansas Drug Task Force, where he applied his investigative skills to combating drug-related crimes in the region. In the community of Fayetteville, the impact of Johnny Ray's murder lingered. Neighbors and friends remembered him as a friendly and successful real estate agent who loved sailing on Beaver Lake. The local Rotary Club held a memorial service in his honor, and a plaque was installed at the Fayetteville Town Center to commemorate his life and contributions to the community. Johnny Ray's family, especially his first wife Diddy, found solace in each other's company and support. Diddy focused on her career at Harp's Food Stores and became involved in local charity events like the Susan G. Komen Race for the Cure in Bentonville. She remained vigilant about keeping her family close and supporting her grandchildren, who missed their stepfather dearly. As time passed, the scars left by Johnny Ray's murder began to heal, though the memory of the tragic events of April 2015 remained a part of Fayetteville's history. The community rallied around the Baxter family, offering support and understanding as they moved forward from the ordeal. This tragic case of love, betrayal, and murder serves as a stark reminder of the complexity of human relationships and the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions. In the quiet, picturesque town of Pine Hill, the gruesome murder of Jennifer Johnson sent shock waves through the community. What appeared to be a peaceful, close-knit suburban enclave was shattered by a crime of passion and betrayal that revealed the dark underbelly of seemingly idyllic lives. The lives of two couples, Daniel and Linda Garner, and Mark and Jennifer Johnson, intertwined in ways that would lead to obsession, deceit, and ultimately murder. Daniel Garner was a respected architect known for his charming demeanor and seemingly perfect marriage to Linda, a dedicated school teacher. Mark Johnson, a successful financial advisor, and his wife Jennifer were the Garners' closest friends. The two couples shared more than just neighborhood barbecues and weekend getaways. They also engaged in a consensual wife-swapping arrangement that initially brought excitement and novelty to their lives. However, beneath the surface of this unconventional lifestyle, dangerous emotions were brewing. Daniel's fascination with Jennifer grew into an all-consuming obsession, one that Linda, his wife, was painfully aware of. Jennifer, sensing the intensity of Daniel's feelings, decided to put an end to the arrangement, not realizing the deadly consequences her decision would provoke. Daniel and Linda Garner had been married for 10 years, and from the outside, their marriage appeared to be a model of stability and happiness. Daniel was a successful architect known for his innovative designs and charismatic personality. Linda, a third-grade teacher, was beloved by her students and respected by her colleagues. They lived in a charming house on Maple Street, surrounded by a well-tended garden that Linda took great pride in. Mark and Jennifer Johnson moved to Pine Hill 5 years ago and quickly became friends with the Garners. Mark, a financial advisor, was outgoing and affable, always the life of the party. Jennifer, with her striking beauty and magnetic personality, was equally popular. The Johnsons brought a new dynamic to the neighborhood, and their friendship with the Garners blossomed over shared interests and mutual respect. The idea of wife-swapping was first brought up during a dinner party at the Garners' home. Fueled by wine and a sense of adventure, the conversation turned to the topic of open relationships, to everyone's surprise. The concept was met with curiosity rather than shock. Over the next few weeks, the idea was discussed more seriously, with all parties agreeing to boundaries and rules to ensure their primary relationships remained intact. The first encounter was awkward but exciting. Daniel and Jennifer and Mark and Linda exchanged partners for the night. It was a thrilling yet nerve-wracking experience, but one that left them eager for more. What started as a once-in-a-while experiment soon became a regular part of their lives, adding a spark to both marriages. Initially, the arrangement seemed to work well. Both couples appeared happier and more connected. They maintained their social activities, often hosting joint parties and going on vacations together. Their secret was carefully guarded, discussed only within the confines of their homes or during private gatherings. The novelty of the arrangement brought a sense of exhilaration, and for a while, it seemed like they had found the perfect balance. However, as the months passed, subtle changes began to surface, particularly in Daniel's behavior. He started to show an unusual amount of interest in Jennifer, often finding reasons to spend time alone with her. Linda noticed his increasing preoccupation but chose to ignore it, hoping it was just a phase. Mark, too, seemed oblivious to the growing tension. Unbeknownst to the others, Daniel's fascination with Jennifer was turning into something deeper and more troubling. He found himself thinking about her constantly, replaying their encounters in his mind and craving more time with her. What had started as a harmless adventure was slowly morphing into an obsession that would have devastating consequences for all involved. Daniel's fascination with Jennifer was no longer just a thrill. It had evolved into an all-consuming obsession. He thought about her incessantly, his mind wandering to their encounters during work meetings and family dinners. His architectural projects, once his passion, now seemed secondary to his desire for Jennifer. He started to find ways to be near her, volunteering to help with tasks Mark usually handled or inviting the Johnsons over more frequently. Linda began to notice the change in her husband. At first, she attributed it to the excitement of their new lifestyle, but soon it became clear that Daniel's interest in Jennifer went beyond their agreement. He became irritable and distant when they weren't with the Johnsons, and his conversations often veered towards Jennifer's likes and dislikes, her quirks and habits. One evening, while cleaning up after a dinner party, Linda confronted Daniel. His reaction was defensive, dismissing her concerns as jealousy. Linda, not wanting to disrupt the delicate balance they had established, let it go but kept a closer eye on him. Her suspicions grew when she found him staring at Jennifer during gatherings, his gaze lingering longer than necessary. Jennifer, too, began to sense Daniel's growing obsession. Initially flattered by his attention, she soon found it uncomfortable. His touches became more possessive, his words more intimate than appropriate. She discussed her discomfort with Mark, who brushed it off, believing Daniel was just more expressive in his affections. Mark's nonchalance left Jennifer feeling isolated in her concerns. The turning point came during a weekend trip to a lakeside cabin. The couples had planned the getaway to reconnect and enjoy some time away from their routine. However, the trip only served to highlight Daniel's fixation. He monopolized Jennifer's time, insisting on taking her out on the lake alone, leaving Mark and Linda behind. The tension was palpable, and Jennifer's attempts to distance herself were met with subtle resistance from Daniel. One night, while sitting by the fire, Daniel made a comment that crossed the line. He spoke about leaving everything behind and starting fresh, just the two of them. Jennifer, shocked and unsettled, excused herself and went to bed early. Linda, who had overheard the conversation, confronted Daniel again. This time, he was less dismissive but still refused to acknowledge the depth of his feelings. Linda's frustration grew as she realized the extent of Daniel's obsession. She loved her husband but was increasingly aware that his infatuation with Jennifer could destroy their marriage and their friendship with the Johnsons. Despite her efforts to intervene, Daniel's behavior only became more erratic. He started to follow Jennifer outside of their arranged meetings, showing up at her yoga classes, and even appearing at her workplace under the guise of casual visits. Jennifer's unease turned to fear. She confided in a close friend who advised her to distance herself from Daniel as much as possible. Determined to take control, Jennifer decided to end the arrangement altogether. She hoped that by doing so, Daniel would return to his senses and they could all move on from this chapter without causing further harm. One evening, while Mark was away on a business trip, Daniel showed up at the Johnsons' house unannounced. Jennifer was taken aback but let him in, hoping to avoid a scene. They sat in the living room, the air thick with unspoken tension. Daniel confessed his feelings for her, speaking of a future where they could be together openly. Jennifer, horrified, tried to reason with him, explaining that their arrangement was never meant to be more than a temporary excitement. As Daniel's declarations became more intense, Jennifer's fear turned to anger. She realized she needed to put an end to this before it destroyed her marriage and her friendship with Linda. She told Daniel firmly that their arrangement was over and that he needed to respect her boundaries and her marriage. Daniel, visibly shaken, tried to persuade her to reconsider, but Jennifer stood her ground. Over the next few days, Jennifer avoided Daniel, hoping he would come to his senses. She confided in Linda, who listened with a heavy heart. Linda knew her husband's obsession had gone too far, and while she wanted to support Jennifer, she also felt a twisted loyalty to Daniel. She promised Jennifer she would talk to him, hoping to defuse the situation. However, Daniel's obsession only deepened. He started showing up at Jennifer's work, waiting for her after hours, and leaving her messages expressing his undying love. Jennifer, feeling increasingly unsafe, decided to confront him one last time, hoping to make him understand the gravity of his actions. They met at a secluded park away from prying eyes. Jennifer reiterated that their arrangement was over and that his behavior was unacceptable. She pleaded with him to let go and move on. Daniel, unable to accept her rejection, grew desperate. He accused her of leading him on and playing with his emotions. Jennifer, maintaining her composure, insisted that they part ways and return to their respective marriages. Unbeknownst to them, Linda had followed Daniel to the park. She watched from a distance, her heart pounding as she saw the confrontation unfold. She could see the anguish on Daniel's face and the determination on Jennifer's. Linda knew that this confrontation was inevitable, but she also feared what might happen next. As the argument escalated, Daniel's desperation turned to anger. Jennifer's refusal to entertain his fantasies felt like a personal betrayal. He lashed out verbally, calling her names and accusing her of ruining his life. Jennifer, holding back tears, stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated. Linda, watching from the shadows, felt a surge of panic. She knew she had to intervene before things got out of hand. She stepped out of her hiding place and approached the two, her voice shaking as she called out to Daniel. The sight of Linda seemed to snap Daniel out of his rage, and he turned to her, his expression a mix of confusion and relief. Jennifer, taking advantage of the distraction, walked away, determined to put as much distance between herself and Daniel as possible. Linda, now alone with her husband, tried to calm him down. She reassured him that they would find a way to move past this, but inside she knew that their lives had been irreversibly changed. The affair had reached its breaking point, and Jennifer's decision to end the arrangement had set off a chain of events that could not be undone. As the dust settled, the true extent of Daniel's obsession and the depths of Linda's complicity would soon come to light, leading to a tragic and violent conclusion. The confrontation at the park had left Daniel in a state of turmoil. Jennifer's firm rejection and Linda's unexpected appearance had shaken him to his core. He returned home that night, his mind a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and despair. Linda, sensing the storm brewing within him, tried to soothe his troubled thoughts, but Daniel remained inconsolable. Over the next few days, Daniel's behavior became increasingly erratic. He vacillated between bouts of intense anger and deep despondency. He stopped going to work, spending his days obsessing over Jennifer's rejection and the perceived injustices he had suffered. Linda, unable to reach him, felt her own frustration and fear growing. She knew something had to give, but she wasn't prepared for the drastic turn of events that would soon unfold. Jennifer, on the other hand, was determined to move forward. She avoided all contact with Daniel, focusing on her work and her relationship with Mark. She hadn't told her husband the full extent of Daniel's obsession, fearing his reaction and the potential fallout. She hoped that by cutting ties, Daniel would eventually come to terms with the end of their arrangement and leave her alone. One evening, Jennifer returned home from work to find Daniel waiting for her outside her house. Her heart sank at the sight of him, and she steeled herself for another confrontation. She approached him cautiously, her voice steady but firm as she told him to leave. Daniel, his eyes wild with desperation, begged her for one last chance to explain himself. Jennifer, sensing the futility of the conversation, tried to walk past him, but Daniel grabbed her arm. His grip was tight and painful, and Jennifer could see the madness in his eyes. She struggled to break free, her voice rising as she demanded he let go. The altercation attracted the attention of a neighbor who stepped outside to see what was happening. Seeing the neighbor, Daniel released Jennifer and fled. Jennifer, shaken and frightened, thanked the neighbor and hurried inside. She called Linda, hoping to find some way to resolve the situation without involving the police. Linda, hearing the fear in Jennifer's voice, agreed to meet with her the next day to discuss how to handle Daniel's increasingly unstable behavior. The next day, Linda met Jennifer at a local cafe. Jennifer, looking exhausted and tense, explained the encounter with Daniel and her growing fear for her safety. Linda listened intently, her mind racing as she tried to formulate a plan. She promised Jennifer that she would talk to Daniel and make him understand that their relationship was over. After the meeting, Linda returned home to find Daniel in a state of agitation. She confronted him about the incident with Jennifer, her voice a mix of anger and concern. Daniel, feeling cornered, lashed out at her, accusing her of taking Jennifer's side and betraying him. The argument escalated and Linda, fearing for her own safety, retreated to their bedroom. That night, Daniel's thoughts turned darker. He couldn't accept that Jennifer had rejected him and that his own wife was against him. In his twisted mind, he believed that the only way to resolve the situation was to eliminate the source of his pain. He decided that if he couldn't have Jennifer, no one could. On a cold, clear night, Daniel made his way to the Johnsons' house. He knew Mark was out of town, leaving Jennifer alone. He broke in through a side window and made his way to the bedroom where Jennifer lay sleeping. The sight of her, peaceful and unaware, fueled his rage and desperation. He grabbed a kitchen knife and approached her, his mind filled with a chaotic mix of love and hatred. Jennifer awoke to the sight of Daniel standing over her, the knife gleaming in the dim light. She tried to scream, but Daniel covered her mouth, his grip strong and unyielding. In a fit of rage, he plunged the knife into her chest, silencing her cries as Jennifer's life slipped away. Daniel stood over her, his mind a haze of conflicting emotions. In the aftermath of the murder, Daniel fled the scene, his hands stained with Jennifer's blood. He returned home where Linda found him trembling and incoherent. She realized immediately what he had done and, in a moment of twisted loyalty, decided to help him cover up the crime. The life they had built, the secrets they had kept, were all at stake. Linda knew that if they were to survive, they needed to act quickly and decisively. Driven by a twisted sense of loyalty and self-preservation, Linda quickly took control of the situation. She led Daniel to the bathroom, instructing him to remove his clothes and wash off the blood. Her mind raced with the urgency of their predicament. She knew they had to act fast to cover up the crime and protect their secret life. As Daniel stood under the hot shower, the water turning pink around his feet, Linda gathered his clothes and placed them in a plastic bag. She scrubbed the floor where he had walked, making sure to eliminate any trace of blood. Once Daniel was cleaned up, she sat him down and forced him to recount every detail of what had happened. Despite his emotional state, Daniel managed to provide a coherent account, his voice shaking with the weight of his actions. Linda devised a plan. They needed to create an alibi and dispose of any evidence linking them to the crime. She called a trusted friend, claiming that Daniel had been with her all evening, ensuring their alibi was backed up. Then she drove to a secluded area outside of town where she burned Daniel's blood-stained clothes and the murder weapon, praying that the fire would consume any remaining evidence. The police questioned everyone in the neighborhood, including the Garners. Linda's carefully crafted alibi held up under scrutiny, and Daniel, although visibly distressed, managed to avoid raising suspicion. The investigation seemed to stall with no concrete leads pointing to the Garners. Despite their initial success in evading the authorities, the psychological toll of the murder weighed heavily on both Daniel and Linda. Daniel became increasingly paranoid, convinced that the police were closing in on him. He withdrew from friends and colleagues, isolating himself in a web of fear and regret. Linda, while outwardly composed, felt the strain of their secret pressing down on her. She became hypervigilant, scrutinizing every interaction and behavior for signs of suspicion from those around them. The weeks following Jennifer's murder were a blur of tension and deception for the Garners. Linda took on the role of the stabilizer, managing Daniel's paranoia while ensuring their public facade remained intact. She monitored the news for any updates on the investigation, relieved that the police seemed to have no solid leads. However, Linda knew that maintaining their cover required more than just an alibi. They needed to create a narrative that would divert attention away from Daniel. She suggested to Daniel that he should appear more distraught over Jennifer's death to align with the community's grief and to throw off any suspicion. At social gatherings and community meetings, Daniel played the part of the grieving friend. He spoke of Jennifer with a mix of fondness and sorrow, his eyes often welling up with tears. Mark, devastated and desperate for answers, seemed to appreciate Daniel's empathy, never suspecting his friend's involvement in his wife's death. Daniel's mental state deteriorated further, his guilt manifesting in nightmares and hallucinations. He started drinking heavily, seeking solace in alcohol, but finding only temporary escape. Linda, fearing he might confess in a drunken stupor, kept a close eye on him, often staying up late to ensure he didn't leave the house. One evening, as Daniel sat slumped over a glass of whiskey, he broke down. He confessed to Linda that he couldn't live with the guilt any longer, that he needed to come clean. Linda, panicked, tried to calm him down and maintain their composure. She suggested they take a short trip out of town. They traveled to a secluded cabin in the mountains, hoping the change of scenery would help Daniel regain some semblance of peace. The isolation provided a temporary respite, allowing them to plan their next steps without the constant pressure of the investigation looming over them. During their time at the cabin, Linda reinforced the importance of their secrecy. She coached Daniel on how to handle police questioning and public interaction, drilling him until he could respond without hesitation. Upon returning to Pine Hill, the Garners resumed their lives with a renewed sense of purpose. Daniel, though still haunted by his actions, managed to present a more stable front. Linda continued to manage their interactions with the community, ensuring they remained above suspicion. However, the cracks in their facade were beginning to show. Friends and neighbors noticed Daniel's increased drinking and erratic behavior, and whispers of his possible involvement in Jennifer's death began to circulate. Linda, ever vigilant, worked to quash the rumors, but she knew their time was running out. As the police investigation continued, new evidence came to light, pointing towards inconsistencies in Daniel's alibi. The Garners' carefully constructed world was on the brink of collapse, and the truth was closer to being revealed than ever before. Detective Mitchell interviewed the Garners separately, noting any discrepancies in their stories. Linda's carefully crafted alibi held up under scrutiny, and Daniel's emotional state seemed consistent with that of a grieving friend. However, Mitchell's instincts told her there was more to the story. As the weeks passed, new evidence emerged. Forensic analysis of Jennifer's phone records revealed a series of increasingly desperate text messages from Daniel, indicating his obsession with her. Mitchell brought Daniel in for further questioning, pressing him on the inconsistencies in his alibi and the nature of his relationship with Jennifer. Daniel, struggling to maintain his composure, stuck to the story Linda had coached him on, but the pressure was mounting and the facade was beginning to crumble. But his nervousness and evasive answers only heightened the detective's suspicions. The turning point came when a neighbor came forward with crucial information. They had seen Daniel's car parked near the Johnsons' house on the night of the murder and remembered the strange behavior he had exhibited. This testimony, combined with the forensic evidence and Daniel's erratic behavior, was enough for the police to obtain a search warrant for the Garners' home. During the search, the police found remnants of the burned clothing and traces of blood that had seeped into the floorboards, despite Linda's thorough cleaning. This damning evidence, coupled with the witness testimony and phone records, painted a clear picture of Daniel's guilt. The net was closing in on the Garners, and Linda realized that their carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. She knew that their only chance of escaping a lengthy prison sentence was to come up with a new plan, one that would shift the blame away from them and onto someone else. As the police closed in, Linda and Daniel faced the harsh reality of their situation. The lies and deceit that had once protected them were now threatening to unravel completely, and the truth was about to be revealed in a way they could never have anticipated. As the evidence against Daniel mounted, Detective Mitchell prepared to make her move. She brought Daniel in for another round of questioning, this time with a different approach. She laid out all the evidence they had gathered, the phone records, the witness testimonies, and the forensic findings. Daniel, cornered and overwhelmed, began to crack under the pressure. Mitchell pressed harder, suggesting that if Daniel came clean, he might receive a more lenient sentence. Daniel, unable to handle the weight of his guilt and the relentless questioning, finally broke down. He confessed to killing Jennifer, describing his obsession, the confrontation, and the moment he lost control. However, in his confession, Daniel also implicated Linda, revealing her role in covering up the crime. He described how she had helped him clean up, dispose of evidence, and craft an alibi. Mitchell, sensing the opportunity to get the full story, had Linda brought in for questioning as well. Confronted with Daniel's confession, Linda initially denied any involvement. But as Mitchell detailed the evidence in Daniel's account, Linda realized there was no way out. Her carefully constructed lies had finally unraveled. She admitted to helping Daniel, explaining that she had done it out of a misguided sense of loyalty and fear of losing everything they had built. The trial of Daniel and Linda Garner captivated Pine Hill and the surrounding region. The courtroom was packed with reporters and curious onlookers, eager to see the conclusion of the tragic tale. Daniel, charged with first-degree murder, and Linda, charged with accessory to murder and obstruction of justice, both pled guilty to their respective charges. Daniel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Linda, despite her role in the cover-up, received a lighter sentence due to her cooperation with the investigation and her previously clean record. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10. Mark Johnson, left to pick up the pieces of his shattered life, found some solace in the justice served but continued to mourn the loss of his beloved wife. The tragedy had left an indelible mark on the community, a stark reminder of the destructive power of obsession and deceit. The state of Delaware was left reeling by these events. Madison Sparrow headed out to meet her friends for ice cream on October 2, 2020, but she never returned home. Her mother immediately alerted the police. Thanks to the swift actions of the officers, disturbing details began to emerge. Madison Elizabeth Sparrow was born on September 12, 2003, in Norfolk, Virginia, USA. She was the daughter of Heather Sparrow Murphy and Richard Prestige and had two sisters, Molly and Gwendolyn. Although not much is known about her family, we do know Gwendolyn was born in 1999 in Durango, Colorado, from Richard's previous relationship. Over time, they settled in Newark, New Castle County, Delaware, the setting for this story. Madison's younger sister, Molly, was born on October 5, 2010. She quickly became Madison's best friend. With a deep affection for children, Madison was the eldest among 8 cousins who all cherished her dearly. She never missed a chance to play with them or put on enchanting performances that everyone found delightful. Her laughter was truly infectious. She had a cheerful spirit that could light up any room. Yet there were moments when Madison would become pensive and dreamy. Her father shared that even from a young age, she showed wisdom beyond her years. She observed and reflected carefully before reacting. Madison's affectionate nature extended to her hugs. They could lift anyone's spirits instantly. Both friends and family saw her as deeply loyal and always considerate about their well-being. Madison's curiosity stayed with her throughout her childhood. She loved learning and experimenting, which led her to join the Girl Scouts, a global youth organization for girls. By the fall of 2012, existing Girl Scout troops were fully occupied, so her mom stepped up as their first troop leader. Madison, at the age of 9, entered the Brownie section, tailored for girls aged 7 to 10. Over the years, Madison distinguished herself as a cookie seller and earned several badges, marking her exceptional performance in various duties. Throughout almost 10 years in the Girl Scouts organization, she developed strong friendships. Later, driven by a desire to work with other young people and create a positive impact, she volunteered to assist in her sister Molly's troop. Madison was warm-hearted and committed to serving God and her country. She always lent a helping hand while adhering to the principles of the Girl Scouts. Like any young girl, she delighted in having fun. Even during her teenage years, she was known as the queen of pranks and loved planning parties with friends. Whether it was movie nights or makeovers that included manicures and pedicures, she could stay up all night but often struggled to wake up before 2 p.m. the next day. Before finishing elementary school, Madison met another central figure in this story, Anuka Stalinsky. Anuka was born in New York on July 9, 2003. The two quickly became close friends and studied for exams together. Information about Anuka is limited, but we know her parents were Robert Stalinsky and Robin Kars. As of 2024, they lived on Aona Mink Drive in Newark. Madison and Anuka moved on to middle school together after completing elementary school there. They made new friends, including Noah Sharp, a fellow Newark native born on August 23, 2001. Details about Noah's background are limited too. However, it's known his mother, Nikki Sharp, had 2 other children, David and Bonna. The trio, Madison, Anuka, and Noah, would often go out together for ice cream or take long walks through the city's green spaces. When Noah and Madison crossed paths, mutual attraction sparked between them, and within a few months, a teenage romance blossomed. Initially, they were head over heels in love. However, in early 2020, after being together for just over a year, Madison decided to end the relationship without giving any apparent reasons. They parted ways amicably and agreed to remain friends. Nonetheless, Noah was heartbroken as he still deeply loved her. During this period, Anuka became a trusted confidant for Noah. They started seeing each other more frequently and texting almost every day. Although Noah's heart was still broken, with time, he began dating Anuka. Despite his new relationship with Anuka, Noah did not lose contact with Madison. On her 17th birthday, on September 12, 2020, he even visited her and brought a gift. That day, Madison's mother noticed that Noah was still upset about the breakup. When Anuka learned about this meeting, she became consumed with jealousy. She couldn't accept that her beloved continued to be friends with his ex-girlfriend. Likewise, Noah's resentment turned into anger. He wanted Madison to feel the same pain he was enduring. The following week, blinded by hatred and jealousy, Anuka and Noah began planning how to end Madison's life. Through text messages, FaceTime calls, and in-person meetings, they exchanged chilling ideas about possible weapons and methods for disposing of the body once the crime was committed. The messages they sent each other indicated their intention to make Madison suffer. Anuka suggested several options, including using a knife to inflict a fatal wound to the heart. They also discussed using a shotgun or perhaps a baseball bat. However, according to official documents, they quickly dismissed the idea of using a shotgun since it would produce too much noise. Although Noah wasn't very confident initially, they eventually decided on using a blunt object. During these discussions, They also performed calculations to determine how many bricks would be necessary to prevent Madison's body from floating if they decided to dispose of her in the water. When doubts arose, they mentioned that another option was to bury her since Noah could dig a hole and knew where to find shovels. In the end, they devised what they believed to be the perfect plan. Madison loved ice cream almost as much as she loved Halloween. Her cheerful spirit eagerly awaited October every year to celebrate her favorite holiday. Anuka knew Madison's taste well and took advantage of this. On Friday, October 2nd, 2020, she called Madison and invited her out for ice cream and to spend the day together. Madison immediately agreed because she hadn't spoken to her friend for a long time and wanted to buy a gift for Molly, whose birthday was in 3 days. On that day, Madison wore black tights, denim shorts, gray boots, and a blue sweatshirt with the inscription New Jersey. She finished her look with white ghost-shaped earrings. Normally, she didn't wear much jewelry, especially earrings, but with Halloween approaching, she decided these ghost earrings would be perfect. At 2:44 p.m., she said goodbye to Heather, saying she would see her later, and left. Although there were no actual ghosts in this story, what happened next was far scarier. It was the last time her mother saw her alive. The following hours, days, weeks, and years turned into a true nightmare for the Sparrow family, her friends, and the residents of Newark. Several hours later, Heather began receiving insulting text messages from Madison's phone number, alongside messages implying that Madison had left the country. Heather initially thought it was a joke and even replied, wishing her daughter luck in her endeavors, while joking that she had forgotten her passport in the safe. However, no response came back even when Heather called Madison's phone. Heather became increasingly concerned when there was still no answer while she was out with Molly, taking her to scout meetings and swimming lessons. The lack of response began to seriously worry her. Heather decided to call Anuka, aware that they were supposed to meet later in the day. Upon answering, Anuka burst into tears, explaining that Madison had insulted her and that she dropped her off near a store. Anuka then suggested contacting Noah, but he wasn't responding either. Frustrated, Heather asked Anuka to continue trying to reach him. The three of them, however, no new information surfaced. Disheartened, Heather opted to return home. On her way back, she received several messages from her daughter's friends who had also received unusual SMS messages and were keen to understand what was happening. Once she arrived home and searched for any clues, Heather found nothing that indicated her daughter had run away. Even the money given to her for her birthday, her clothes, and her credit card were still in her room. These strange messages made little sense. Madison had no reason to run away, especially without taking essential items like a bag with clothes and money. At approximately 8:30 p.m., when Madison failed to come home, Heather contacted 911 and reported her daughter missing. Despite continuous efforts to connect with people, all attempts were fruitless. Upon learning of the situation, Heather's parents traveled from another city to support their daughter. She also notified Madison's father, residing in Colorado, who promptly shared information on social media, appealing for assistance in locating his daughter. On the next day, Saturday, October 3rd, 2020, the Delaware State Police issued a golden alert for 17-year-old Madison. This alert triggers all required procedures for searching for a missing person within Delaware. Over 2 days, police search teams, family members, and numerous friends scoured the farmlands near the University of Delaware, where Madison was last seen alive. The media also spread information about the search, urging people to provide any details they might have related to Madison's whereabouts. Delaware State Police simultaneously started questioning Madison's friends, and all evidence pointed to her ex-boyfriend. According to some sources, the girl headed to a wooded area in Newark behind an elementary school, where she was also seen with Noah on the day she disappeared. Detectives detained and interrogated the young man for almost 9 hours from October 4th through 5, presenting several conflicting scenarios and insisting he didn't know what had happened. Eventually, the barrier of silence broke, shocking everyone. The young man confessed not only to taking Madison's life, but also claimed that Anuka was his accomplice. Noah informed police that Anuka hated Madison because she was jealous of her relationship with him. He also elaborated on how deeply he had been hurt by his breakup with Madison. Noah recounted driving Madison to the wooded area behind the elementary school. As they walked along a trail, He hid behind bushes with an aluminum baseball bat in hand. He told officers how Madison was happy to spend time with her friend and unsuspecting of the danger ahead. Suddenly emerging from hiding, Noah struck her on the head twice with great force. He admitted that he put all his strength into the second blow and said that it was at that moment he snapped. After months of uncontrollable anger towards her for breaking his heart, unable to contain himself, he continued delivering more blows to her body. Following the assault on Madison, Noah and Anuka transported her body using Anuka's car to a site beneath a bridge near the intersection of I-95 and a Delaware State Road, approximately 15 minutes away from the crime scene and close to a warehouse. Upon reaching this location, they tried to submerge her body in the river but failed. Instead, they opted to conceal it in a shallow grave they dug at the same spot. Using details provided by Noah, investigators meticulously searched the designated area. There, they unearthed an aluminum baseball but used as a weapon, bearing traces of blood. The crime scene yielded clothing worn by Madison when she left home, with some articles showing evidence of scorching. Subsequently, they guided law enforcement to a wooded area near the junction of I-95 and Delaware State Road. It was here that he and his accomplice had clandestinely buried the body. On Monday, October 5, 2020, Corporal Heather Piper announced the finding of the body, leaving Madison's family, friends, and the entire community in disbelief. A few days later, on Friday, October 9th, hundreds of individuals gathered at the high school football field to honor and remember the victim. The autopsy revealed that Madison's death resulted from blunt force trauma to the head. Experts also found Noah's and Anuka's DNA and physical evidence collected both at the crime scene and where the body was discovered. Noah faced charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a crime, and first-degree conspiracy. He was placed in a correctional facility with bail set at $1 million. On Monday, November 16, 2020, over a month after the tragic event and following the processing of necessary evidence, 17-year-old Anuka was also arrested. Her arrest occurred after a grand jury in New Castle County indicted her on charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a felony, and first-degree conspiracy. Meanwhile, Madison's family was in disarray. Heather repeatedly stated that a rational reason for why her daughter's life was taken would never be found. Her main plea for justice was that these criminals would never again be able to harm others or themselves. Although Noah admitted to detectives that he committed the crime, during an official court indictment, he did not plead guilty. This led to speculation that his defense might argue mental instability, a common tactic lawyers sometimes use to justify their clients' actions. This case appeared to be no exception. During a preliminary hearing, Noah's attorney stated that at the time of the murder, Noah was undergoing treatment for potential schizophrenia under the care of a psychiatrist. The lawyer also mentioned that Noah had sustained an injury in Chester County, Pennsylvania, approximately 3 weeks prior to the crime. She elaborated that due to this head injury, her client experienced gaps in memory and other issues. However, she did not specify the cause or severity of the injury. In May 2021, Anuka pleaded guilty to charges of first-degree murder and first-degree conspiracy. Her lawyers negotiated a deal with prosecutors wherein she agreed to testify against Noah regarding his intent to end Madison's life. According to court documents, several individuals, including those close to the victim, informed the police about Noah's alleged alter ego, a second personality. Prosecutors contended that Noah had spread this information as part of a premeditated plan to murder Madison and later used this narrative in court. After 2 years of awaiting justice, the trial began on October 20, 2022, in New Castle County. During the proceedings, approximately 30 witnesses were called by Deputy Attorneys General Matt Foley and Yanowski Davis. The courtroom displayed hours of video recordings of Noah's interrogations with state police detectives. The audience listened to Noah's altering narratives until he ultimately confessed. The defense challenged this evidence by emphasizing that their client was interrogated for too long. Attorney Monica Jerome noted that detectives manipulated the interrogation process. Noah received guidance on what to say and was subjected to pressure, but it was clear to everyone that this was simply a desperate attempt to justify the actions of the accused by any available means. The prosecution also presented text messages exchanged between Noah and Anuka detailing their plan for the crime. Faced with this evidence, the defense tried to convince the court that someone else had control over Noah's device and that he wasn't the one messaging Anuka. Noah's mother and brother were called to testify sequentially, giving conflicting accounts several times. Nikki stated that her son was not wet when he returned home on the evening of October 2nd, while David claimed his brother was wet and looked like he'd been in a swamp. Nikki mentioned that shortly after Noah's arrival, Anuka entered the house calmly. In contrast, David said she entered angrily, slamming the door. Prosecutor Matt Foley asked Nikki if she had discussed the evidence against Noah with him. She replied no. However, prosecutors played an audio recording of a phone call between Noah and his mother from a month before the trial where they discussed surveillance footage from an elementary school. In the conversation, Noah mentioned his face wasn't visible in the video where he and Anuka were seen near the elementary school about an hour before Madison's murder. Nikki reacted with relief. The video showed an African-American of similar height and build as Noah carrying a baseball bat and walking into the woods with a girl. The defense questioned relatives about head injuries Noah allegedly sustained. Noah suffered a head injury on September 13, 2020, and another unconfirmed injury from a bicycle fall just hours before police interrogations on October 4th. Noah's lawyers suggested these injuries might have caused dissociative amnesia in their attempt to justify his statements. Faced with the claim he made to the police, the prosecutors questioned whether the injury was part of a conspiracy to murder Madison. The defense contested this point somewhat uncertainly. Anuka confirmed all the prosecution's arguments during her 3-hour testimony in court. In her account, she calmly explained how Noah convinced her that Madison was speaking ill of her behind her back. Friends and relatives of the victim, however, emphasized that Madison never spoke negatively about her friends. After 8 days of court sessions and presenting over 250 pieces of evidence, the jury took only 3 hours to reach a final verdict. Noah Sharp was found guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder, and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. When the jury's decision was announced, Noah and his mother showed no emotion. Noah simply turned and smiled at his mother. The Madison family cried in relief before leaving the courtroom. Heather, Madison's mother, uttered a phrase her daughter had used before: "Choose light, not darkness. Love conquers all." She also expressed gratitude, saying, "We want to thank our friends and family. This has been a 2-year process, and we couldn't have done this without their love and constant support." She continued by thanking the community and specifically Newark Charter School and its administration and families. Additionally, she appreciated those who supported the Love Wins 5K over the past
2 years and backed the Madison Sparrow Memorial Scholarship aimed at aiding future educators.
Regarding Anuka, when Noah's guilty verdict was announced, prosecutors stated that according to Delaware state law, she would be recommended a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years as she was a minor at the time of the crime. Noah Sharp's sentencing brought a sense of closure to the community, but the aftermath of the crime continued to resonate deeply. The shock of Madison Sparrow's brutal murder left a lasting impact on Newark, Delaware, where the tight-knit community struggled to comprehend the tragedy. Memorials and tributes to Madison popped up around the town, with vigils held in her honor, reminding everyone of the bright and promising life that was cut short. In the wake of the trial, Heather Sparrow, along with her family and friends, became vocal advocates for victims' rights and mental health awareness. They launched the Madison Sparrow Foundation, dedicated to supporting young people and promoting community safety. The foundation's work focused on providing resources for mental health, offering support to victims of violence, and fostering environments where young individuals could thrive without fear. Anuka's sentence, although more lenient due to her age, was still met with mixed reactions. Some community members believed she deserved a harsher punishment, while others felt her role, albeit significant, was overshadowed by Noah's actions. Anuka's family, grappling with the fallout, faced scrutiny and isolation. Anuka herself expressed remorse in court, but many questioned the sincerity of her apologies. As Madison's family moved forward, they clung to the positive memories of her life. Madison's spirit was celebrated annually with events that reflected her love for community service, education, and fun. The Love Wins 5K became a staple event, raising funds for the scholarship in her name and drawing participants from all over, united in their desire to honor Madison's legacy. In schools and youth organizations across the area, conversations about friendship, jealousy, and mental health became more prominent. Educators and counselors worked to identify signs of distress among students, aiming to prevent such a tragedy from happening again. Programs emphasizing emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, and supportive friendships were implemented, inspired by the lessons learned from Madison's story. Madison's friends, who had been part of her close-knit circle, found ways to channel their grief into positive actions. They spearheaded initiatives in her memory, from blood drives to community service projects, ensuring that her legacy of kindness and compassion continued to touch lives. The legal proceedings had also highlighted the importance of thorough and humane interrogation practices. Noah's lengthy and intense questioning raised discussions about the rights of the accused and the ethical boundaries in criminal investigations. These debates sparked a broader conversation about justice, fairness, and the need for a balanced approach in the legal system. Despite the heavy burden of loss, the Sparrow family's resilience and the community's solidarity exemplified the power of unity in the face of adversity. Madison's story, though tragic, became a catalyst for change, inspiring efforts to create a safer and more empathetic world for future generations.